Well, we are halfway done with the entire class, so that's kind of exciting. And our last lesson next week is probably going to be pretty short. I debated whether or not to even add it in or to do it, but it's kind of some additional things. It'll be kind of, I think it'll be helpful for just things to think about and maybe use later on and refer back to, but it's not super critical that we get it in necessarily. So we'll just probably have a shorter lesson next week, kind of more for fun. So why don't we go ahead and pray, and then we'll jump into some notes and things. Dear Father, thank you for this time and just for the abilities that you've given each of us and the unique, even life experiences that you've equipped us with, and for the calling you have for each of us to serve you. Just help us to do that to the best of our ability and to try to honor you and only be loyal to you and not try to please others or please ourselves, Lord, but just take us and use us. Help us to be vessels that are meet to be used by you, and even though we're just earthen vessels, Lord, help us to be honoring to you and something that you can receive glory from. And just bless our class today. Help us to have wisdom to learn these things and a good time of discussion, and may it be pleasing to you. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so I make sure you have your hymnal and your notes, because we will be getting into the hymnal. And actually, it works out where I kind of wanted to talk about hymnals just for a quick second. So we're using, obviously, the Trinity Hymnal Baptist Edition. And you can go ahead and turn in the hymnal to page 500, because we're going to be getting to that here in a few minutes in our opening. But if you didn't notice, behind me, I have a bunch of hymnals. And so I just wanted to talk about hymnals for just a quick second and kind of put a plug in for some of the good ones. Great Hymns of the Faith is a really good one. It's a little bit smaller, but it has some really solid hymns in it. And these, you can't actually buy them anymore, but sometimes you can come across some used ones, or you can get one that's older. You can find one, but really good hymns. Only a couple ones that, are not the greatest in this hymnal, but most of them are really good. Yep. And then Melody Publications has the Psalms and Hymns and Spiritual Songs, which is really good. They have a lot of the older ones. They put all the original verses in it, and they go back to the original text and the original music and stuff. So a lot of the tunes will be less familiar, but as you learn those, really cool hymnal, and they put a lot of scripture beside each line of each hymn. So that's a really cool thing about Psalms and Hymns and Spiritual Songs. Then I have the Living Hymns. Unfortunately, this is not the old one. This is the newer one by Striving Together. But I was able to get it from a third party, so I didn't have to support West Coast to get it. So that's a good one that we use. I mainly use those four. The one that I have here, and then these three up here. Basically, all these other ones that I have, they are, at this point, they're more for reference. I've probably used almost all of these, except for maybe one, at different points in my life, different churches we've gone to, different colleges and things. So the way I have them lined up here is kind of from better to worse. So then we have the Rejoice hymns, which actually has some good index information in the back. Like, they arrange things really well. It's easy to do research on hymns to find out the dates of the authors and things like that. But they also include a lot of the Getty Townend music, a lot of Sovereign Grace. So there's a lot more songs that are more the modern hymns that are CCM, that are like Complete in the new version, things like that are more new age music that I definitely do not recommend. And then I have some of these Wilds songbooks, actually, like from going to the Wilds and working there, and then from just using their music. I use these a lot, kind of grew up with these, but then definitely I wouldn't recommend them anymore, just because the more I've learned about music and kind of gone through that journey, God has definitely showed me just how, you have to divide the line between stable and unstable music, and you don't want to use music that replicates the world. So basically, these are now more for just reference. But these are their songbooks. So I have those for reference. Then you have the Majesty hymns, Becca's songbook. That's what I used when I was homeschooling. Then we have Bible Truth hymns, which has some good ones. They're very Southern Gospel, so their whole music section I wouldn't recommend. But then Songs and Hymns of the Heart and Songs and Hymns of Revival are just two of the hymnals put out by North Valley. I got one of them from a church that we would use at a church that we attended, and then the other one when I was actually at Golden State, the first college that I went to, I used that one for my music class. But definitely would not recommend their hymns or anything to do with North Valley or Golden State or any kind of Hiles school or anything like that. So I still have those just to look at in case there's an old hymn that I can't track down or that I want to get in a different key or something. I can still use those. Then we have the worst hymnal of all time that I have definitely for reference is the soul-stirring Songs and Hymns. And I have to bash this one publicly because it's terrible. The editor, Curtis Hudson, actually went through, and this one is a newer version. This one's put out by Sword of the Lord. And so this is kind of a newer edition. But the editor actually went through and found all the hymns that mention repentance, and he tried to take out he tried to take out the doctrine of repentance, although he missed it in Victory in Jesus. So the line that says, "And I repented of my sins and won the victory," he forgot that one. Or maybe he just thought there would be too much backlash if he took that out. So I actually went through and marked all the hymns that were tampered with in here, and definitely wanted to keep this for reference. Let me see if I can find one of these. I marked them in the index too. I'm just flipping through quickly here. It's kind of crazy, like Come Thou Fount, how it has a fourth verse. That's in Melody Publications. It's not in many hymnals, but it actually has a fourth verse that's really good. Actually, the verses that are in this hymnal that are taken out of most hymns are some of the best doctrinal substance that's out there. So like 288 is an example. I am resolved. So they took out the fourth verse that says, "I am resolved to enter the kingdom, leaving the paths of sin," because they didn't want to teach that you have to repent of your sin to be saved. So they're like, well, you don't enter the kingdom by leaving the paths of sin. So they took that out. I'll just find another one here quick. Give Me Thy Heart, 318. Just very interesting. The corruption. 318. So they changed in the third verse. It used to say, "Turn now from sin and from evil depart." But now it says, "Trust in me only, I'll never depart." So it totally took out the doctrine of turning from sin, to teach something else, to kind of teach a easy believism kind of doctrine. So this is not a good hymnal. If your church uses this one, I'm sorry. Try to find a better hymnal and use it in your church.
Our new church uses the Great Hymns of Faith.
Oh, great. Yeah, I love that one. I wish there's more churches that use it, but then again, it's hard to find them nowadays. So you gotta find an old collection of them that you can get. But I say all that basically to say that, for one thing, I'm very thankful for how God uses every experience in your life, and really when you make small choices to try to separate from something that's wrong and to try to do right, all throughout your life, God uses that, and He opens up another opportunity and shows you more truth. And then as you continue to pursue truth, He just heaps on the blessing. Because I read something recently, it said doing what's right is the reward in itself, basically. Because you can't look for a reward, well, if I do something right, what am I going to get from it? But doing what's right is the reward in itself. And just knowing truth and following truth, the whole process of growing, even going to PCC, I could say going there was an experience that taught me a lot about what's right and wrong, and doctrines that you can't give up, and you can't repudiate separation. You can't soften up on your music. That's a huge problem out there. Going to Golden State, seeing all the corruption there, all the scandals, just all the shallow gospel, all of that. It's all just a growing experience, and I'm very thankful for how God works, that God doesn't waste any experience, and really just serving God is the reward, and doing what's right, being right with Him is the reward. So that's just something about the hymnals, just so that no one gets the idea that I use any of these. So that's what I was going to point out with the hymnals. Now, as far as our exercises from last week, everyone did some of the songs, and I got to watch the videos of everyone conducting and everything, and everyone is doing super good. So tell Peter when he comes back that I didn't bash him or anything. Everyone's doing really great. Actually, I think we're set up really well for this week's exercise, and I think it'll be no problem, just with a little bit of practice and everything, because we all have a great foundation. But I did want to point out some of the common things that I saw. So the 2-beat pattern, I think, was the one that we struggled with the most. So I just want to point out a couple things. For the 2-beat pattern, normally what I was seeing was something that was like this, and 1 being out here, but 1 actually ended up being more down here, and then 2 up there. So people were doing more like 1, 2, 1, 2, and almost getting the 1 at the bottom, where it was like 1, and then you kind of wing out a little bit, and then 2, 1, 2. We want it to be more like this. We want it to be a little bit more extreme, and we don't want 1 to be down here. This is the only one where the downbeat is really not, you don't end on the downbeat. You want to flip out. So you want it to be 1, 2. You want to get your hand all the way out to the side. For everyone else, it's the right side, but whenever I conduct facing this way, I'll use my left hand so you can kind of trace it. So you want it to be 1, and you want to get all the way there before it's count 1. And then 2 up there. So just a little thing. That was really the biggest problem that I saw. 1, 2, 1, 2. Or if it's 6, 8, then it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3. Instead of the like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Because that almost looks more like a 1 pattern where you're kind of just going up and down, which we haven't really talked about. You don't use it that much. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You want to make sure you get out there just to make it clear. Almost if you have to flip your wrist a little bit and just kind of like a backhanded slap almost. That's kind of what it ends up being. So that was the 2 pattern. The 3 pattern, I really didn't see any problems with. The only thing I would say is we want to make sure for the 3 pattern that, and this was kind of a thing across the board with multiple patterns. When you're conducting, you just don't want your hand and your pattern to be right in front of you. So I did see that with some, that when you were conducting, it was almost like right here. But then when you bring your second hand, then you don't have any room. So you always want your hands to be off to the side. So like if you're doing it with this hand, then you want to do the 3 pattern out here, so that when you add both hands, it's especially important with the 4 pattern because both hands have to come in. And you don't want them to touch, but you want them to be able to come in. So just having your hand, if I were to turn around, just having your hand out to the side, not in front of you. So you want it to be out to the side. So that was really the only thing with the 3 pattern. Same with the 4 pattern. Just get your hand off to your right side. And the other thing with the 4 pattern that I'll just mention briefly was I did see this a little bit where the downbeat was high. Kind of like this. So it would come down, it would be like 1 because maybe you're going a little slow, or maybe you're trying to get that downbeat, and then you go 1 and then 2, 3, 4. But you really want your downbeat to be at the bottom of your ictus. So you want it to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Also, we'll talk about this a little bit, but you don't want to be too loopy on 2, because then you end up being like 1, 2, 3, 4. Don't want to be that extreme. You want it to be a little bit more sharp. You want it to be 2, and then stay down low and get to 3, and then 4. So you want it to be lower so that none of the beats comes up even close to the top of your conducting window here. So just a point there. Get 1 down low, and then 2 should hook up, 3 should go over, and 4. You don't want to get too loopy on the 2. You want to be kind of make a sharp hook and then come down and go over. So that's just a couple things I noticed that we might want to work on. But other than that, and I sent comments to everyone, I think, and mentioned some things. So now what I want us to do is actually get a little practice with these. So you're on page 500 in the hymnal. We're going to actually do a song that mixes the 4 beats pattern. So this is what we want it to look like. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then the 2 beat pattern. That was a very small 2. Bigger 2. We want this to look like 1, get way over there, and 2. Okay? So that's 1. The 2 happens like in the middle of this movement. 1, and then 2 is like right here, and then you get over here. And then 3 is kind of in the middle of this movement, like right there. And 4 happens somewhere in the middle of you going back up. 4. So it's not very robotic. It's actually supposed to be pretty flowing, pretty musical, because you're not 1, 2, 3, 4. It'll be more like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So normally the counts happen as you're en route to go to the next place, except for the downbeat. When you do the 1, you want to already be there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So the more we practice, the more we'll get a little smoother with that. For this one, the 1 does happen all the way out here. 1, 2. 2 is happening on the way up, pretty close to the top, up there. 1, 2. So what we're going to do is analyze hymn number 500. And this is really cool because this is how you actually should, go about preparing to lead a song in church. So this one is He Leadeth Me, because we have some other hymnals floating around here. So He Leadeth Me, if you go ahead and look that one up. We're going to analyze this, and then we're going to try to actually conduct it properly, okay? So what you do, you start out, I'll tell you, we're going to do verses 1 and 2, okay? So if you want to mark those. It starts out, He leadeth me, O blessed thought, and then verse 2 says, sometimes mid scenes of deepest gloom. So those are the 2 verses we're going to do. So just take your hymnal and just start looking through it. He leadeth me, this is a 4-4, so the 4 beat pattern. He leadeth me, O blessed thought, O words with heavenly comfort fraught. Now, there's a fermata there, so that means we're going to be holding something out. So what you want to do, in this case, you can't always trust the fermatas, but they do help you when you see them. Sometimes you won't see them, and then you have to figure it out on your own. But for this one, that second line, on come, for comfort, write 2-4. Okay, so for come, so if you see comfort, fraught, we're going to do 2-4 here. Comfort, fraught is back to 4-4. Okay, that's how we're going to handle that fermata, because that's where we see the fermata sign. So comfort, fraught. Keep going. Whate'er I do, where'er I be. So now we have the same thing, but there's no fermata. That's why you can't trust the fermatas. So where'er is another 2-4. So where'er I be will be a 4-4. So go ahead and pencil this in on there so that when we're conducting through it, you already have your notes.
Air is 2-4, right?
Right. Air is 2-4, and then B is going to be 4-4. And I'm not doing this, you know, I'm not going to divide out the notes and everything like that. This is just for us to see the right pattern that we should do. Where'er I be, still 'tis God's hand that leadeth me. And so when we sing this, we hold that out. And it's not necessarily written that way, but we do sing it that way. So leadeth is going to be another 2-4, and then on me, put a 4-4. So as you can see, hymns can be a lot more complicated. I chose this as an example on purpose because this is kind of a harder one. And you think, you know, He leadeth me. That's a common hymn. You know, we all know that one. But it can be a little bit harder. You have to think a little bit more than you might initially assume. So that there's a lot of switching of patterns in here. A lot of going to 2-4 and 4-4, 2-4, 4-4. Let's look at the refrain here. He leadeth me by His own hand. He leadeth me. Holds out again. So on leadeth, you put a 2-4. And then right by that fermata, above me, put 4-4. me. His faithful follower I would be, for by his hand he leadeth me. And that last leadeth me is the same thing. Above lead, we have a 2-4. And then me, you have 4-4. And if it helps you, you don't have to write the full fake time signature. You could just write 2 and 4, just so you know the 2 pattern, the 4 pattern. So this is what we have to deal with. Throughout this whole hymn, we're only going to use these 2 patterns. And then you have kind of, jotted down in pencil kind of where each of these patterns is going to fit in. Okay? Same thing for verse 2. So let's just try singing through.
The last bar in the chorus, his faithful follower I would be, hold that one out too.
We don't actually. Yeah, that's a good question. It's written in there, but normally how we sing, unless your church is different and your church is used to holding that out or something, then you would adjust for that and you would account for that. But most churches that I'm aware of, how I'm used to singing it, we don't observe that.
How would you direct the amen?
If they sing it, yes, you would.
Two,
You would, for that, it's kind of how long the conductor holds it out. So for amen, you normally want to end the last, which we'll talk about this a little bit. This is good that we brought it up though. The last syllable, sung syllable, you want to end with an outward motion, okay, and then you're gonna close it off at the top. So however you count backwards, however many beats you're gonna have, syllables that are sung. So for this one, there's 2, amen. So you can figure out, kind of what you want to do with that, but you have 2 beats to account for. So you're going to end that 4-4 pattern with 1, 2, 3, 4. So you're up here. Now you've got to get 2 beats in there, and the last one has to be this motion. So you can either go down for the first, and then out for the next one. That's not as clear because people might wonder, when are you at the bottom? So what I normally do is you kind of make it up a little bit, but I do like an inward motion because that's a movement, and then people will tell when that's over, you switch directions and you go the opposite direction. So I would do something like, for by his hand he, and then the 2 pattern, leadeth me 2, 3, 4, amen, like that. So you can, kind of make up whatever you want to. Or if there's multiple parts that are going to be like, amen, then you can go, amen, as long as you're giving a motion for however many. I had one of my teachers described it as, picture like a broomstick in front of you, and you're just slapping it back and forth, because you can sit there and do motions as many times as you want to, just kind of slapping it back and forth, and people can tell, oh, okay, so I switch, now we're counting this count, we're on the next count, as long as people can keep up with you. So if it's something weird like that at the end, you can kind of make up whatever, but you want to make sure that last one is going out and you end it clearly. So if it's like, amen, that's how most churches probably do it. So let's practice through this.
Power on. Bluetooth.
Hey.
Device
You
paired.
forgot.
Oh, you're good. You actually didn't miss that much. We're just practicing our first one. So if you guys just want to share hymnals so that he gets the cheat sheet there of of what we're doing. So we're going to do He Leadeth Me. I have no idea how much the volume should be turned up for this. So let me give it a test run. I think that'll work. So basically, what we did, I'll give you a little crash course for the crash course. No, I'm just kidding. So what we did is we just went through the hymn, and we're kind of humming it to ourselves, and we're trying to see what patterns we should use, because not everything, just because it says 4/4, not everything is going to be the 4-beat pattern, and some parts get held out longer. So we go through and write down basically like this. Comfort fraught is going to be held longer because we have this fermata. So for comfort, we do 2/4. We're going to do the 2-beat pattern. You could just write the 2 if that's less confusing, because you don't have to worry about the bottom number here for this. So we're going to have 2 counts on comfort. Fraught, it's going to get all 4 counts. So we're kind of adjusting to how we would sing the song. And so once you go through the whole hymn and you kind of mark it up, this is a good way to prepare if you were to lead singing in a church or whatever, or if you're trying to practice through a hymn. I don't know if any of the hymns that anyone chose to practice last week had any of these, where you maybe were conducting along and then you're like, oh, I'm off somehow, you know, I missed something. It's probably because something like this, something was supposed to be held out, and then you have to adjust for that, basically. So now we're just going to go through and we're going to do the first 2 verses. So we'll do the first verse, maybe kind of recoup and do some damage control, and then we'll do the second verse and try to get a flow of how you would connect the 2-beat pattern and the 4-beat pattern and getting those in the right time. So does that kind of make sense? Feel ready for this? All right, let's try it. So all right, so we'll start with just the 4-beat pattern. We're coming in on he, which is the 4th count. So you're going to go 1, 2, 3. We're not going to actually do the first beats, but when they sing he, it's going to be he leadeth me. Okay, and that's how we'll jump into it. But don't forget, I'll say, when we get to the 2 patterns, I'll say 2 and, just when I say 2, you're trying to get to that out, the 2 and, you're trying to get here. And then 1, 2, 3, 4. You'll go back into the 4 pattern, and then when another 2 one comes out, then you're going to go from 3, 4 to the 2 and 1, 2, 3, 4. So we'll kind of go back and forth between the 4 and the 2. All right, let's give it a shot. See how we do. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. 1, 2, 3, 4. 2 and 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 2 and 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. 2 and 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Here comes 2. 1, 2, 3. All right, how'd it go?
Not great.
Yeah, for these, you almost have to stay glued to the hymnal, because if you start trying to think about it, you'll get mixed up and stuff real quick. So we'll try the second verse. It'll be just the exact same thing. You got to think ahead when you see that 2 coming. You're going to go from the 3, 4, and then it seems unnatural because normally you would go straight down, but you're just going to shoot out to the side. So 3, 4, 2, and 1, 2, 3, 4. This is tough stuff. This is good.
So right after fraught, the next note, what would we do on that? We do the 1, 2, 3, 4.
So fraught will get 3 of those counts, and then what will get the 4th one, and then air. So right after the measure, it's gonna start back at the beginning of the 4 count pattern.
So that gets 3, that gets 1.
Yeah. So fraught, what, air, like that. So let's try the second verse.
Are the others all like that? Sorry.
Yeah, they are. Basically, wherever you wrote 4, the rest of that measure is going to get 4. So it doesn't really matter how many notes come after that. All of those notes to the next, you just start doing the 4 pattern on this word, and then it'll take care of you to the end of that measure, and then the next measure you keep going with the 4 pattern, and it'll keep you on track, basically. Yeah, so you don't even have to worry about the notes. Just look at the 2 or the 4 that you wrote down, and just follow that.
Okay.
So I'll back this up a little bit so that we'll hear the end of the chorus, and then we'll start in on the second verse.
It sometimes gets louder and quieter for us, so that would be helpful if you can start it before.
Okay, I'll back it up and then I'll turn it up a little bit. That might help. It's probably just the signal of trying to listen to this.
Well, I think it's possibly you talking.
Oh, okay. I won't talk. Just look at your hymnal. I think we were finally getting it at the very end there.
Yeah.
No, that's good. It's hard because it's quiet and it's like coming through the phone, so it's difficult.
And they ended it with like 3 counts on me. So should we do a 3/4 instead of 4/4?
No, because the fourth one is
Pick up.
sometimes. Yeah,
So at the end of the song, it would be 4.
yeah, at the
Right,
end of the song.
Okay, we're
Mhm.
going from verse to verse.
Good. Well, that's just a little bit of practice there. All right, we're gonna jump into the notes here. So yeah, work on if you're trying to practice hymns, you want to work on ones that you can look through and that are gonna have these time signature changes. And you won't be given a new time signature. You're just gonna be given a fermata, or it'll just tell you to hold it out or something like that. So that's what you want to really look for. It's those are more challenging ones to practice. All right, so in the notes, and before I do this, before I forget, I already talked about this book. I just wanted to mention a few other books. This is just the theory that we went over, lesson 1. Seems like a long time ago. 2 books that are good for choral conducting, which is what we've been spending the rest of our time on. This one is Choral Concepts by Don Nguyen, is how you pronounce his name. Choral Concepts by Don Nguyen, if you can see that. It's a good book. If you can find it, you probably have to try to grab it used. But really good on just conducting. I don't think he's a Christian, obviously, but it's really good as far as conducting goes. He was a great conductor. The other one I would recommend is this one, Up Front is what it's called, Becoming the Complete Choral Conductor. And it's basically an article on all these topics over here. There's a bunch of articles written on all those topics. And Guy Webb is the editor down here. Guy Webb is the editor, called Up Front. And Don Nguyen actually wrote the article on conducting. A lot of these guys wrote articles on different aspects of conducting and things like that. So that's a good resource. Got those 2. And then this one, I'll just go ahead and mention this. This goes more along with our last lesson, which we'll go over next week. But this is just Voice and Singing by Regal, Dr. Robert Regal. This is just more of a handbook for voice, basically. So as a conductor, as a leader, especially if you're leading choir or something, you almost become a voice teacher to a choir, to a bunch of people at the same time. So it's always helpful to know voice and to know like what different parts are going to struggle with, to be able to help them with their voice, because it's more than just conducting. It's also voice teaching. So I'd recommend this one, and we'll get into more of just some highlights of that side of it, the voice side of it, next week. So let's rip through these notes here. Lesson 3, Techniques for Conducting. Starts out with the conductor's role. Okay, introduction to the conductor. I like this statement. Being the only musical performer not producing sound makes the conductor a unique type of musician. That's from a paragraph 13 of an article that's online that you can go read a lot more technical things about conducting. But basically, the conductor is the link between the written music and the communication of that music through sound. So he must instruct the musicians and singers when to come in, when to cut off, how fast to sing, when to change tempo, as well as how to express the dynamics, how to incorporate musical phrasing, and how to achieve the proper intonation, color, articulation, and blend, etc. for each song. So the conductor has a heavy role. It's a big responsibility. There's a lot going on. In church, which is really our focus here, the conductor, for both the congregation and for choir or ensemble, has two goals. First, correctly interpreting the musical notation such as time, tempo, and tone of the piece. And then second, effectively communicating the message, which is the most important aspect of choral music. So we already talked about keeping the time, setting the tempo, and really achieving the right tone for the song. But also all that really is working together to communicate the message of the song, to get the lyrics of the song or of the hymn across. It's really for praising God and for edifying one another in the church. So that's our two main goals. Here's our definition of terms. I'm not really going to say much about these other than what it already says. Definition of terms, we have tempo is the relative speed of the beat, and it affects how fast the time signature is counted. So basically how fast the song goes. Dynamics is the loudness or softness of the music, which should culminate at a single peak. So when you're thinking about dynamics, you really want to emphasize only one part of the song. You don't want to have, a bunch of really high points. It should kind of have like some low points, some high points and everything. And then it really culminates at only one point. That's something to keep in mind. Phrasing is grouping sections of musical thought into large units, each with a continuous flow. Intonation, and you can do a whole separate study on all these things, but intonation refers to the accuracy of pitch and the tension involved in producing that pitch. Color has to do with tone production and is referred to as brightness or darkness of sound. So if you want the choir to have a darker sound, not as shrill, but a little more mellow, that's the color. You're going to try to adjust the color of the sound with the choir, with the congregation. Articulation describes the length of each note and how the notes are connected to each other. Resonance, or blend, is the best balance of tall intonation, dark color, and unison articulation. So that's really three things go into the blend. The intonation, the color, and the articulation. Now, this is one pet peeve of mine, and conductors will say this. Never tell a choir to blend better or to be more resonant, because they are human beings and they don't know what that means. If you just look at a choir of 15 people and you're like, blend better. Well, that's 15 voices. They don't know how to make their voices fit better together. That's almost asking the impossible of them. So what your responsibility is as the conductor, tell them what they need to do to get the blend better. The blend is our responsibility, not the choir, because each individual person in the choir doesn't know how to blend better. So we have to tell them, all right, let's try in the tenor section, let's try to have a little bit taller intonation. Or in the ladies, let's get some darker color. Okay, so you have to do the thinking of what the choir needs to get a better blend. Don't just look at them and tell them to blend better. We never just tell the choir to improve on blend. We have to worry about that and tell them specifically, like, hey, let's get our vowels to sound taller instead of flat. We have to tell them exactly what to do. Just a pet peeve there. Diction is clarity of pronunciation, and it is done with the tip of the tongue, the teeth, and the lips. So that's very practical, how to get good diction. Elements of conducting. So these are just some thoughts. You guys have probably already encountered some of these and put them to use. Using the conducting pattern here, the first thing, for most songs, the introduction does not need to be conducted. Okay, and the conductor will begin by motioning the upbeat. And this depends on actually when the singers come in, but you want to motion the beat that comes right before they come in, and the purpose of that is to show them that they need to take a breath. The exception, I'm reading the second sentence there, the exception is if the piano begins playing the introduction at an undesirable tempo, in which case the conductor should motion for the intro. Okay, so he should conduct the intro. So for most scenarios, if you're in a church and the piano starts playing, it's going to be probably the right tempo and everything. And so then you just come in right as the people are singing and you just carry on that tempo. But if the piano is going way too slow or way too fast, then you can jump in there and try to basically signal to the pianist the tempo that you want them to play at, to try to adjust that before people start singing. But in general, you don't need to conduct the intro. In songs where the singer begins on beat 1, the upbeat should be motioned to prompt the singers to take a deep breath. So the upbeat there is this one here, 4. So if they start singing on beat 1, you want to really motion beat 4 to prompt them to take a deep breath. This must be a strong and confident motion and should be communicated with more than the arms. A look of excitement, solid eye contact, taking a deep breath, raising the eyebrows, those all help to communicate that the singing is about to begin. So when people are standing there and you're trying to cue them in as to how to come in and when they should take a breath, you really want to get in there. So like for He Leadeth Me, you're actually going to start singing on the 4th count. So he, so then you back up 1. And so that means you take sometimes both hands and you're going to go, He leadeth me. So you always want to start ahead of everyone else. So you motion that 3rd beat so that everyone comes in on the 4th one. That's key. The downbeat should be the most pronounced motion in the entire pattern to give security and confidence to the musicians and singers. When conducting with 2 hands, the arms should not cross. On count 2 of the pattern, also be careful not to raise the hands too high on count 3 or count 2, so as to not confuse it with the upbeat, which should be very clear. So that goes back to what I mentioned briefly. You don't want any of the beats to go up so high that it looks like you're going back to home base and then going to go down. So just a couple things to be clear about. Held out notes, breaths, cues, and cutoffs will be generally communicated with the left hand, while the right hand steadily keeps the tempo unless only one hand is available to conduct. So if one hand is available to conduct, so for example, if you're holding your hymnal, like maybe you don't have a stand or something, then you're going to do everything with your right hand. You're going to do everything with one hand, or your right hand from this view. So you're going to be starting people in, you're going to be holding things out, cutting things off, and then you start back in. You're going to do everything with one hand. But most of us are going to have something that we are going to put the hymnal on, and we're going to have both hands free. So your right hand is going to keep doing the pattern. Your left hand is reserved for cutoffs or bringing people in or things like that. So that's just normally your left hand. That's what your left hand is going to be doing. Page 2 at the top. Don't worry too much about all the charts and things. Basically, I just wanted to say that studies show having clear, sharp points to the pattern provides the most clarity. So I hope no one's doing some of these other things on chart 1 over here. I don't know who those people learned conducting from, but I put a check mark by the good one. So you want to do that first one over there, and then chart 2, you want to do the second one. Basically, you don't want to get too loopy. You want it to be clear, sharp points instead of, loopiness. So anyways, there's a list of hymns that you can practice conducting with their time signatures. Notice that bottom one, the one that goes, I will sing of my Redeemer. There's 2 time signatures, so the first one gets conducted in a 3-count pattern, the second one gets conducted in a 4-count pattern, and that happens. There's a lot of hymns that they do have multiple, so that's a good one to practice if you're up for the challenge. And we're going to spend the rest of the time... Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. What would one day be conducted in? 9/4?
So that is basically, you're going to look at it, it's a compound meter, so you're going to divide it by 3. So that would be just a 3-beat pattern. Okay. So yeah, if it's higher than 4 and divisible by 3, just chop that thing in thirds because it's going to be one of the compound meters. And then they're giving you way more notes than you need. You're just going to be conducting, every third one, basically. So yeah, and sometimes you'll see 6/4, like the second one, Trusting Jesus. That's a compound duple. So that's just a 2-count pattern. Trusting Jesus, that is all. You're just going to be going, simply trusting every day. And you're just going to conduct that with a 2-count pattern. So yeah, divide it by 3, don't divide it by 2. And, because then you're going to have problems.
Interesting, because I will sing it's the verse with 3, the chorus with 4.
Yeah, the chorus goes, I will sing of my Redeemer with his law. Yeah. Or blood he purchased me. Yeah, so that's where he switches. It's kind of abrupt on the chorus, but everyone knows it. Like, everyone's going to sing it the normal way. You just have to make sure you're telling them what to do the right way. So, and I'm going to shut this off. I don't think we're going to... Well, we might actually come back to that. All right, so we have about 15 minutes left at tops, at the most. Let's try to squeeze this in a few minutes here. Left hand functions. This is really what... This is the new thing we're adding in today. Left hand functions, okay?
Why did you do this?
Uh-huh.
Why did you take this?
Oh, I am. I just restarted it.
Oh.
Okay, so left hand functions. Really, this is the new aspect of lesson 3. And it's a difficult one because it has to do with independence of the hands. One hand is doing one thing while the other one is doing something else. So as long as sound is expected... Oh, this is very key, very key. As long as sound is expected from the singers, the left hand should either be down by the side or moving, never held still. So if you're ever conducting, I'm going to swing over this way. If you're conducting and you have your right hand doing the pattern here and your left hand is just sitting here, that does not indicate that sound should be coming out of people's mouths, because if your left hand is sitting there, that kind of means silence, you know, if your left hand is just sitting there. So just don't have it there, okay? So just conduct with your hand down by your side and then pick it up. If you want to show that, you know, you're not supposed to take a breath here, you hold your hand out and then you just bring it back down. People are still singing. You're going to bring it up and cut them off, and then you're going to bring them back in. You can bring them in, you know, but you're not going to just have your left hand there, just sitting there, okay? So as long as sound is expected, keep the left hand either moving or down by the side. Okay, so we'll do this. Before I get any farther, no one needs comfort fraught anymore, do you? I think we're done with that. We need to designate some choir sections here. I'll tell you what I like. If I was a conductor and in charge of the choir, I wouldn't put the guys behind the girls, because for one, there's really not much sound benefit to that. For two, it's kind of awkward and it doesn't even look the most appropriate, depending on how close the choir is standing and what have you. It doesn't even sound any better. There's no sound benefit to it at all, and just having guys standing behind girls is just unnecessary. So what I would do is, say you have your choir, okay? I like it kind of standing in this position here. Let's just go, divide that in half. So you can have, you know, guys and guys, girls and girls. You can do whatever, you know. Some people split it this way, and that's what I'm talking about, all the guys in the back and all the girls in the front. I like doing your 4 sections, okay? Plus, if you're motioning to one section and there's 2 rows, one in the front and one in the back, you're either going to have to be like the front section or the back. I mean, how do you know, it's harder to motion, like back section now, front section, you know. So if you just point in one section and you divide it like this, everyone knows what part is supposed to be seen. Simply. Keep your basses in the middle, because the lower the note, the more solid it is, and really everyone should be listening to the lowest note anyways. So I would put the basses here, because you want them in one of the middle sections. I like alternating guy voices and girl voices, okay? So this is just one way you can do it. Tenors here, basses there, and then you have your high voice here. So you could put altos here and sopranos here. That's an interesting contrast, because you got your lowest and highest voice, and that's going to actually provide stability to the sopranos being on this outer edge, because they hear the bass note and not much else, so that way they're solid on the right note. And then you have your 2 highest male and female voices on the outer edges, you know, the 2 lower voices inside. I kind of like this layout. You could switch, obviously you could do bass here, tenor there, and then you can switch it up, but let's just go with this, okay? So I'll write this down and we'll just say that this is, for the sake of this class, this is what we'll follow. So that's going to be our choir. Cues are indicated with the palm up, open hand, motioning invitingly towards the singers. Okay, so something like this. So you can either go forward, kind of coming down from above. You can come in from the side if you like, kind of like this. Depending on how fast the song is going and where your hand ends up being, you might have to go from the side instead of from the top. Cutoffs are indicated by a circular motion with a finger pinch and an upward motion. Okay, so that's just, it's hard to put it into words. It looks like this. You do a circular motion, and then you pinch the fingers and you pull up, but mostly out. Okay, so circular, pull out. Picture if I had a Kleenex box sideways, okay, and the Kleenexes are sticking out this way, and your hand comes around, and you grab a Kleenex out of it, okay? So your hand comes around. That's kind of the motion that you're going to do. Yeah. So you come around like that. Okay, that's a cutoff. Held out notes are indicated with a palm up, open hand, moving from center, moving from the center of you, moving outward. So that's a held out note, okay? Or if there's multiple notes, and you just want them to hold it out and not take a breath. Breaths are indicated by a quick cutoff followed by a cue from the front or from the side if it's fast, okay? So if you're like singing, let's see. Still 'tis God's hand that leadeth me. Cut. He lead. So that's how you're going to motion that. Lead. So lead is the 2 pattern. So leadeth me. Notice I start this early because you can't just go me. You can't, cut real fast in the motion because you have to give them some preparation. So leadeth me. Cut. He. And you notice if you cut and then you motion right away, you're going to be doing more from the side, a side cue. Unless you go, leadeth me, cut, he. But that's a little more awkward to do a cut and then come at it from the front. So I normally just do circular, cut, cue from the side. So it's, you cut out and then you cue back in. So you'll just have to practice it. And it's fun when you start practicing this for the first time, getting your hands to do separate things, Anyways, so now those are just the mechanical functions. That's just getting people to stop singing and start singing at the right times. Musical functions is on top of that. So dynamics, we already talked about. Someone tell me one way to indicate dynamics that we've already mentioned.
Small or big.
Yeah, the size of the conducting pattern. So with one hand, you can indicate the dynamics if you want people to sing, loudly or softly, just by the size of how you're conducting. But now the left hand can play a big role in the dynamics here too. So dynamics can be controlled by elevating a palm up hand to get louder or lowering a palm down hand to get quieter. Okay, so it's going to look like if you want louder, sometimes you can even you can give it some energy to show people, I want you to express this more. And then if you want people to soften, you turn your hand like this and you kind of motion it back towards yourself. Okay, so loud, soft. And remember, we want one big peak per song because more than that it just turns into CCM where the whole thing is a peak. But you really want to build to one moment based on, if the hymn is a powerful hymn and there's one climax in the text, you build up to that and then you come softer, back down from that. I think even when we would do singing at the music module, we would do that sometimes. There was one of the songs that we were singing in the gym where we would kind of swell and then we would kind of back off a little bit. It's really nice to just really bring out the text of the song. It's good, and your left hand can do that if it's available, to motion that. The size of the right hand pattern also indicates the dynamics. So, for instance, if you're trying to really express this, you're going to be getting bigger with the right hand, and then smaller with the right hand as your left hand comes back in. Okay, to indicate that. So that is the clearest way to direct it. I have to keep turning sideways because I'm not skilled enough to conduct with my left hand and do this. I can't do it backwards. So, but you get the idea. So if I was to face you and I'm conducting big and I really want people to get into it, and then now, I'm trying to soften it back down. This is how the choir is going to see it. They're going to see my hand like this, you know, saying, shh, you know, we get back down to quiet. Okay. And then you can get to normal, and then you can get big again. So that's basically the motions there for the dynamics. Phrasing is indicated basically the same way you would do the held out notes. Sometimes you do it in an upward arc shape. So if you didn't want people to cut off there, say you're the choir director and you told them get a big breath before. We're going to sing right from the verse into the chorus. So they're going to sing, still 'tis God's hand that leadeth me, he leadeth me. You're going to use this hand to kind of do an arc motion to tell them, leadeth me, he lead, and there's not going to be much break in the voice. You're going to
take your hand away and just...
you go off to the side, and then you can kind of just drop it down to your side. They're not going to stop singing unless, or they shouldn't stop singing unless you cut it off. And we're getting more into the musical side of this, which is not going to be used as much in congregational leading. You can, and I encourage it, to use it with congregational singing if you have a really musical church. But this is more probably going to be used for choir, you know, as you're trying to teach people who are a little bit more musically inclined and who are paying attention to things like when you breathe, when you're singing. Intonation can be hinted at using hand motions to pull down around the waist area. So like, this is kind of awkwardly worded, but what I'm trying to say is like intonation. So if you're telling people, you know, your sound too like ee, you know, maybe with color, maybe they sound too bright. You're trying to tell them, you want them to have a darker color. Then you can kind of make a pull down motion like, you know, with your left hand. And that'll kind of make the choir think about how they should be singing, not just hitting the right note, but the actual intonation. Color is kind of the same way. It can be affected by motioning to the lips, the waist area, circular hand motions. So you can do something like this to tell them like it should be supported by your diaphragm. You know, you should be singing from, you know, not just from your voice. It should be from your air support, your breath support. You can motion to the lips. If you want their lips to be more in an oval shape, maybe they're sounding flat on something like oh or something, and you want oh. You can, while you're conducting, you can motion, and just the different ways you motion, it really adds to the musical sound that'll be produced. The last thing I said was articulation is indicated using finger pinches or other motions with usually the fingers. Like if you want them to really pronounce their consonants, because vowels are heard in music, but consonants are sometimes not. So if you really want them to be crisp, you'll motion like to close the vowel at the end of a line, or even at the beginning. One song that I was listening to, Crown Him with Many Crowns. Sometimes choirs sing that and it just sounds like, you know, it sounds like the vowels. But a good choir, they'll come into it with, crown him with many crowns, the Lamb upon his throne. Hark how the, you know, kind of like that. They'll indicate the consonants a lot more, and you won't just hear the vowels, but not many choirs actually pronounce the C on the beginning of that. Crown him with many crowns. So articulation, you can motion that by hand motions, or normally something like doing this to make them think about, okay, I need to be crisp and pronounce the ending consonants after my words. Like crowns shouldn't just be crowns the Lamb. It should be crowns the Lamb upon his throne. You know, not many people own close that at the end. So there's a lot that you can do with your left hand. So for our exercises this week, that's what I want to add to this, is so exercise 2 here, it says practice leading the first 2 hymns you worked on from lesson 2, exercise 3. So the first 2 hymns that you worked on, same ones, but I want you to add your left hand and I want you to specifically, so clean up the right hand, basically anything that I mentioned that you could work on, but also include left hand functions from this lesson. So cues, so bring the people in, cut, so think about when people need to breathe, and how you can cut and then cue them back in. If you want something to get louder or softer, or if you really want to emphasize how to breathe, that's a little bit more technical. So, but especially the cues and cuts, I want you to incorporate those on those two hymns. Exercise 3, I want you to listen to these two recordings and practice leading the arrangements as they are sung. Okay, so you'll hear in these two that sometimes the choir gets softer. And so you're the leader, pretend like you are the conductor telling them to do what they're already doing because it's already recorded. Okay, so when you hear them get softer, you need to maybe jot that down or write it, so that you remember that that's the section where you want them to be quieter, and you have to indicate it. Okay, so whatever you hear, you should conduct. You should motion for them to do it. So there's those two recordings there. Also remember our seating chart. You might want to, I don't know if you have that written in your notes somewhere, because if there's a certain part of the choir, so like, and can it be that I should gain? The chorus, how it has an echo part in it. So you need a motion to who should be singing. Okay, so your right hand is going to keep going. Looking at this, so you can say, okay, so men are on the extreme outside this way, women are the extreme outside that way. So you can just say, in general, when I point to this side, that's going to be the men, that's going to be the women. So as you're conducting, you want to bring in the men when they sing, the women when they sing, men, women. You don't have to get super technical where you're like, bring in the men, bring in the women, cut off the men, bring in the men, and then cut off the women and stuff like that. But just practice at least cueing each side. Maybe don't worry so much about cutting.
What about like if it's the altos? Or you're just saying just think about right and left, or?
Yeah, I would, because I think for this one it's just men and women. So however you want to indicate that. I was just thinking, since men, at least these men are on this side and those women are over there. But yeah, if it's a certain section, if you can hear, like maybe you're listening to a piece, and you want different parts of the choir to do different things, then you could practice, specific sections that you would motion to, all 4 of them instead of just the men and women, kind of generic. Or you could switch up the seating arrangement and put both men over there. You could totally do that. You could do tenor, bass, alto, soprano. It's kind of the same thing that we already have. And then you have, this part is the men, that part is the women. But yeah, and then you can motion to each individual. If there's a lot of echoing going on or something like that, you can point out each individual one. So, and then there's just some questions. The last one, exercise 4, is I want you to listen to, I think I did a lot of different versions of these. Which one did I tell you to listen to? What song is it?
Heartland Crown and the Oasis Crown.
What song is it?
Crown Him with Many Crowns.
Okay, so it is Crown Him with Many Crowns. I have Like a River Glorious on mine. But for you, so listen to those 3. So Crown Him with Many Crowns is going to be a little more subtle, but when you listen to it, you'll hear some differences between the 3 choirs, and I want you to answer the questions here and just think about what the conductor may have done differently, or his teaching style, how it might be different, and what produces the difference of sound with the 3 of them. So there's more blatant examples. It's really easy to find bad singing. So there's more blatant examples, but none of those will probably sound horrific to you first listening to them. But the more you listen to really good music and stuff like that, then you'll hear a huge difference, and you won't be able to stand, certain sounds and types of singing and stuff. So just listen to those and try to pick out some of the nuances, some of the differences. And I gave you specific questions so that you can really think about these specific aspects of it.
Max.
Yep.
Would you mind explaining scooping and sliding?
Okay, so scooping is going down to a note without nailing it, basically, without hitting it right on. So scooping is going to be going from like like that, instead of like and sliding is the same thing but going up. So if you start on Or some people they'll try to jump, but they'll be like ah, ah, something like that, instead of properly singing it where you just go straight from one to the other, like ah, and try to nail it. So that's scooping and sliding. Sliding is going down, scooping is going up, but you don't quite get it. So or is sliding going up? I think sliding is going up. Sorry, yeah. You slide up to it and you scoop down to it. Or straining is when people try to sing a high note, but they either don't use falsetto or they don't have proper breath support. So instead of like, oh, getting way up there like that, they're like, oh, like they really belt it out and they try to just go for it. And that's not a good vocal technique. You'll hear that. If you really listen for straining, you'll hear that. On the high notes, you'll hear, ah, people just screaming, basically. And screaming is not singing. But honestly, they're just trying to hit that note, and they're not being taught by their conductor the proper way to get all the way up there. So they're belting it out, and they're causing damage to their voice. So, yeah, those are some things to listen to. I'm trying to see if there's anything else that might be... So when you're listening for blend, you're just trying to see, do you hear like 100 little voices and it'll sound more whiny? Or does it sound like one voice, where no one really sticks out, no part of the choir really sticks out, it just sounds like one voice. Vocal technique, dynamics, so like, do they respect certain areas where they get louder and quieter? Do they kind of swell and emphasize one high point, or is it all just kind of like quiet, or is it all shouting, or things like that? Pronunciation of the words. So just some interesting things to just kind of look at, think about, because as conductors, that's our job, is to accurately express the music. We have to take the music from the written page and put it in a singable format where people can sing it. So it'll be a good exercise to listen to those three and just kind of see what you find.